Good evening, my friend. I hope your night has been calm, peaceful, and kind to you. You've made it back to Midnight Radio True Crime, where the rain falls softly outside your window, and every story is told just for you. So take a deep breath, let the world slow down, and thank you for choosing this moment to rest with me tonight. Because tonight's story might make you think twice about who lives right across the hall. This is the man in apartment 3B. Now, get comfortable, pull your blanket close, and listen carefully, because not every neighbor is who they seem.
When I first moved into the building on Pine Avenue, I didn't expect much. It was old, slightly leaning to one side, with paint peeling off the stair rails and a faint smell of dust and old coffee lingering in the hallways. But the rent was cheap, and the view from the third floor caught the morning light perfectly. I needed a quiet place to start over. My new apartment was 3A, and right next door was 3B. The first time I saw him, I was carrying boxes up the narrow stairwell. He appeared from the shadows of the hallway, tall, with a button-up shirt tucked neatly into worn jeans, glasses reflecting the light so I couldn't quite see his eyes. "New tenant?" he asked, voice low, almost polite. "Yeah," I said. "Just moved in today." He nodded once, too slowly. "Welcome to the building." Then he smiled, just with his mouth, not his eyes, and slipped back into his apartment. The door closed softly, almost noiselessly. At first, I thought he was just another quiet neighbor, but that was before the nights got strange. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, met the elderly woman downstairs, got used to the sound of the elevator that always groaned halfway up. But on my fifth night there, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to tapping, soft, deliberate tapping, coming from the wall behind my bed, the one that bordered his apartment. First, I thought it was pipes, but it wasn't random. It was rhythmic. Top, top, top. Pause. Top, top. I waited, listening. Then it stopped. The second I leaned closer, the silence deepened, like whoever was doing it knew I was awake. The next morning, I ran into Mr. Clark in the hallway. He was locking his door, wearing the same shirt as before, perfectly ironed. "Morning," I said. He smiled faintly. "You should keep your windows locked at night," he said. I blinked. "Oh yeah, sure." He didn't explain, just adjusted his glasses and walked away. That night, I checked my windows twice. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things missing around the building. A doormat, potted plant, someone's laundry basket, small, harmless things that didn't make sense to steal. Then it was something of mine. A small cactus that sat by my door, gone. I told myself maybe the janitor moved it, but that night I heard it again. The tapping. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Top, 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 top. It sounded closer this time, like whoever was doing it wasn't just behind the wall but inside it. I whispered, "Hello." It stopped instantly. For almost a full minute, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. Then faintly a whisper, low, male, too close to be real. It said, "I see you." I froze. My body refused to move. Every sound in the apartment disappeared. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told myself it was a dream, stress, imagination. But when I left for work, I found something wedged under my doormat. Polaroid photo. It was blurry, grainy, but it was me, sitting on my couch. I felt sick. I looked up and down the hall, but everything was quiet. I went to the building manager, but he just sighed. "Probably a prank," he said. "Kids around here get bored." That night, I pushed my dresser against the door and left all the lights on. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up again. This time, not from tapping, but from the sound of a camera shutter. Came from behind the wall. The following morning, I saw the building manager standing outside 3B. He looked pale. "Something's wrong," he said. "Smell's been coming from here for days." He knocked. No answer. Used his spare key. When the door opened, I'll never forget that smell. It hit like rot and chemicals and something worse, something human. The police came. They sealed the floor. I watched through the stairwell railing as they carried out bag after bag of evidence. One officer came up to me later, "You live next door?" he asked. "Yeah. Is he okay?" He didn't answer that. Just asked, "Did you ever notice anything strange?" I told him about the tapping, the whisper, the photo. He nodded slowly. Then he showed me something they'd found. A wall covered with Polaroids, dozens of them. Every tenant in the building, all taken through windows. And in the middle of the wall, my photo. Right above it, written in marker, were 5 words. "Soon, she'll know the truth." That night, when the police left, I sat alone in my apartment. The building was quiet again. Too quiet. I walked into my bedroom, staring at the wall that connected to his. The plaster looked untouched. Smooth. Ordinary. But when I turned off the lights, the moonlight caught something. A small circular mark above my bed. Barely visible. I leaned closer. It was a hole. And inside it, something shimmered. A lens. Rain fades in softly. Thank you for spending your night with Midnight Radio True Crime. If your heart's still racing, that's okay, you're safe now. But before you fall asleep tonight, maybe take a look at your walls. Sleep well, my friend, and I'll see you tomorrow night. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that Polaroid again, me, sitting at my desk, unaware someone was watching. Morning came with its usual pale light, but nothing felt normal. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Even the old woman downstairs didn't call out hello when I left my apartment. The elevator groaned like it always did, but it sounded hollow, echoing too long. I made coffee, but I couldn't drink it. My hands shook too badly. I kept staring at that wall, the one separating me from apartment 3B. The wall that now had a small, perfectly round hole just above my bed. I had to see it up close. I grabbed my phone, flashlight on, and held it to the hole. The lens was still there, tiny, smooth, shiny, almost innocent looking if you didn't know what it was. I poked it lightly with a pen. It moved slightly, then with a faint click it dislodged. I dropped it onto the carpet. It was a miniature camera, one of those old-fashioned cylinder ones, not digital. I picked it up carefully, breathing shallowly. My mind raced. How long had it been there? Days? Weeks? Months? I put it in a plastic bag and took it down to the police. They frowned, asked questions, then called another officer to check the camera. While they inspected it, I glanced toward the open door of 3B. The smell hit me immediately, sharp, chemical, metallic. Inside, I could see glimpses of the room. A mattress without sheets, stacks of boxes, Polaroids taped on every wall. One wall had letters written in black marker. Truth must be seen. I felt like I was staring into the mind of a man who had no boundaries, no fear, no remorse. Later that afternoon, I went back upstairs. I couldn't stop thinking about the wall, the hole, that camera, the Polaroid. I started checking every inch of my apartment. Behind paintings, under the sink, in the vents, behind the wardrobe. And then I found another hole larger this time, behind the wardrobe. I pressed my ear to it. First, nothing. Then, a faint whirring sound. Mechanical. A fan? A motor? Something running behind the wall. I froze. My stomach twisted. I didn't know whether to call the police again or just leave. That night, I didn't sleep on my bed. I moved my mattress to the living room, all the lights on. I tried to watch TV to distract myself, but around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text. Stop looking at the walls. My chest tightened. I blocked the number, turned off my phone. But then my TV flickered. Static. Then black. And I heard it. A voice. Low, distant. It said, "I can still see you." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. When morning came, I tried to convince myself it was a dream. But the holes were still there. The camera was gone from my bedroom wall. Someone had taken it. I went to the police, desperate. They said the camera would be processed at the station. But even as I left my apartment, I felt like eyes were still on me. For days, I avoided my bedroom. I slept on the couch, lights blazing, curtains drawn. But every small sound, the creak of the building, the hum of the fridge, even the wind brushing the window, made me jump. Then came the letters. First, just one, slipped under my door. You can't hide forever. Then another the next morning. I'm always watching. And more started appearing, folded, taped, hidden. Some with crude sketches, some with words, some with Polaroids of me, some old, some fresh. I knew it was him, Mr. Clark. But he was gone. The police said he vanished. No trace. Yet here he was, still reaching into my life. I couldn't tell anyone. No one would understand. They'd think I was paranoid, insane. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt him. Watching, waiting, smiling somewhere behind a wall, a vent, a corner I couldn't see. And then one night I heard the tapping again. Top, top, top. Pausing in the exact rhythm it always had. And this time a voice, soft, deliberate, unmistakable. You're mine now. I ran to the door, checked the hall. Empty. I ran to the windows. Locked. I ran to the wardrobe. The hole was larger now. And I knew, without a doubt, that the man in apartment 3B was still there. Watching. Waiting. Planning. For 3 days, I didn't leave my apartment. The police said they were still investigating. But the silence said otherwise. Every minute that passed, I felt that wall breathing beside me, like something alive was hiding within it. By the fourth night, exhaustion won. I fell asleep on the couch, the lamp still on, TV buzzing faintly. Around 2:40 a.m., I woke up to a faint scratching sound. Not tapping this time, scratching. Slow, patient, deliberate. Came from inside the wall again, right behind the old clock. I stood, my throat dry. The noise stopped. Then 3 short scratches, 1 long one. Pattern. My body froze because I remembered that rhythm. I'd heard it before. It was how Mr. Clark used to knock when asking to borrow my toolbox. Y whisperat, no. Because Mr. Clark wasn't supposed to be here. The scratching grew faster, louder. Then it stopped completely. Silence. Until a faint voice, muffled but close, came from behind the plaster. You moved the camera. I dropped the clock and bolted out the door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt heavier, humid, like someone had just showered. I rushed downstairs to the lobby, but the front desk was empty too. The security guard's chair was spinning slowly, as if he'd just left it. Outside, the night was damp. Street lights flickered weakly. I crossed to the other side of the street, turned, and looked up at my building. 3rd floor, my apartment window. The curtain moved. Someone was inside. I called the police again. They arrived 20 minutes later, by which time the curtain was still. 2 officers went up with me, flashlights in hand. Everything was as I'd left it. The couch, the lamp, the TV, even the half-eaten sandwich on the counter. But the wall, the one with the hole, was now patched, perfectly smooth. Fresh plaster, still wet. The officers exchanged looks. "Are you sure someone was in here?" one asked. I just stared at the wall, unable to answer, because when I leaned closer, I saw something in the wet plaster. A single fingerprint, pressed deep. That night, I stayed in a motel. But around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Picture. It was the motel room door. From the hallway. Taken minutes earlier. My chest locked up. I jumped up, grabbed my things, and threw open the door. The hallway was empty. Silent except for the faint hum of a vending machine. At the far end of the hall, a door slowly closed. Room 117. I called the police again. They searched it. Empty. No one had checked in there in weeks. But there was something in the bathroom sink. Wetpleister. White dust. And a Polaroid photo face down. The officer picked it up with a glove. When he turned it over, I almost vomited. It was me, sleeping on my motel bed. I packed everything the next morning and went back home, stupidly thinking I'd feel safer where I knew the layout. The moment I stepped inside, I smelled it again, that metallic chemical odor from 3B. And there, taped to the inside of my front door, was a note written in thick black marker. "Welcome home." Below it, a single Polaroid of the hole in my wall, the same hole I'd seen days ago. But this time, the photo showed an eye staring through it. Why, smiling, alive. I should have left. I should have moved out of that building entirely. Every rational part of me screamed it, but something kept me there. A mixture of fear, obsession, and the impossible need to know what Mr. Clark had left behind. I spent the morning packing small things, trying to pretend I wasn't terrified. But the apartment didn't feel empty. Every corner, every shadow seemed alive. The faint chemical smell lingered in the air, and the walls, white and innocent, felt like prison bars. I decided to check the bedroom wall again. The hole above my bed had been patched, but I could still feel its presence. A line in the plaster, a subtle unevenness my fingers traced. Something told me there was more. I dragged the wardrobe away from the other side of the room, the corner where I had first discovered the larger hole. The wood scraped against the floorboards. My heart thumped in my chest. Behind the wardrobe, the wall looked untouched, perfect, unbroken, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I pressed my ear to the plaster. First silence, then the faintest scratching. Top, scratch, top. I jerked back. It wasn't coming from inside the wall. It was coming from beneath it, the floorboards. I leaned down, pressing my ear to the hardwood, and there it was again, slow, deliberate, methodical, like someone was moving under the floor, just beneath me. I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize it. Old buildings make noises, pipes shift, rats crawl, but then came the sound of something sliding, not tiny, heavy, something scraping along the wood, slow and controlled. I froze. I realized then that my entire apartment was compromised. Every wall, every floor, every vent. A surveillance grid meticulously installed by someone who had spent months learning this building. Someone who had anticipated my every movement. I called the police immediately. They came quickly this time, flashlights in hand, and started inspecting the floorboards in my bedroom. First, they found nothing. Then, under the far corner of the room, a floorboard creaked differently when stepped on. The officer pried it up with a crowbar. Beneath it, a shallow cavity, lined with black tape and wires. My stomach turned. Inside the cavity were dozens of miniature cameras, cylindrical, old-fashioned, mechanical types, each positioned to capture a specific angle of my room. The bed, the desk, the doorway. The officer shook his head. "How long do you think someone's been doing this?" I swallowed hard. "Since I moved in." And then I noticed it. A single Polaroid, wedged carefully under the wires, facing upwards. I picked it up. It was me, sitting at my desk, laptop open, headphones on. My expression was neutral, normal, but something about the eyes in the photo made my blood run cold. Someone had taken it just moments ago. I realized then that Mr. Clark had never left. Not really. Somewhere in the building, in the walls, in the pipes, he was watching, planning, waiting. The police tried to assure me they would search the entire building. They'd send in K9 units. Detectives would sweep the walls, the vents, the attic. They even considered pulling up the floorboards throughout the third floor. But they warned me, with old buildings, it's nearly impossible to find someone hiding that way. I was left with a decision. Stay in my apartment and risk being monitored, or leave everything behind. I couldn't leave. Not yet. I had to know what he wanted. That night, I lay on the couch, lights on, curtains drawn. I didn't sleep. Around 1:30 a.m., a faint scratching started again. Not from the walls, not from the floor. Came from the vent above my bed. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. Slowly, I crawled toward it. The vent cover was loose, the screws unscrewed, carefully removed and replaced by someone with knowledge of the building's interior. I lifted the vent cover. Inside, wires snaked through the ductwork, connecting to a small black box. The camera lens stared back at me, red light blinking faintly, and next to it, a small note taped carefully to the ductwork. "I see everything, even when you sleep." I felt bile rise in my throat. My apartment, my sanctuary, had been invaded in every conceivable way. Every wall, floorboard, and vent had eyes and ears. And then came the sound I'd feared most. A whisper, soft, almost indistinguishable. "You can't hide from me." It was so close it sounded like it was coming from inside my skull rather than the vent. I screamed. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but the line went dead mid-sentence. My apartment lights flickered. The air grew cold, icy. Something was in there with me, not just watching, present, waiting. Hours passed. I didn't move. I didn't eat. I didn't breathe properly. Just listened. By dawn, everything was silent. The vent was empty. The cameras were gone. The note was gone. But my hands shook uncontrollably, my chest tight, and my entire being knew one undeniable truth. Mr. Clark was not gone. He never would be. Somewhere in the building, behind walls, under floors, inside vents, he waited, watching, planning, and I knew the next move would be his. The next few days were a blur. Couldn't sleep. I barely ate. Every sound, the drip of the sink, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, felt amplified, malicious. The building that had once seemed quaint and old now felt like a labyrinth designed to trap me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the cameras were old, removed, inactive. Maybe the notes and Polaroids had been left behind, not part of some ongoing plan. But my instincts told me otherwise. Every time I walked past the walls, every glance at the vents, every shadow on the floor, screamed that he was still here, watching, waiting. On the third night after discovering the vent camera, I was sitting on the couch, blanket wrapped tightly around my shoulders, trying to calm myself with the TV. My laptop was open, but I wasn't paying attention. And then I saw it, a shadow moving across the far wall. It was subtle at first, a flicker, a movement against the moonlight seeping through my curtains. I froze, heart hammering. The shadow didn't match anything in the room. The couch, the coffee table, the lamp, nothing could have cast it. I gripped my phone and pointed the flashlight toward the wall. Nothing. The shadow vanished. And then I heard it. A whisper, right behind me. Don't turn around. My stomach twisted. My breath caught in my throat. Ispunaniwai. The room was empty. The floor was bare. No one. No sign of anyone. I ran to the window and looked down. Empty street. Empty alley. Only the faint hum of distant traffic. I felt safe for a moment, foolish as it was. But when I turned back inside, the shadow had returned. Closer, bigger, and it moved with purpose. I grabbed a chair and held it in front of me, trembling. The shadow paused. It shifted, stretched, and then I realized it was attached to the wall. Not a shadow. A figure. Tall. Thin. Looming. One side of its face hidden in darkness. Hair disheveled. And those eyes cold, deliberate, unblinking. I froze. The figure whispered again. I've been waiting. My mind screamed at me to run. But the only way out was past it. And the hallway was long, narrow, dark. I backed toward the door, chair raised like a shield. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip it. The figure moved closer, gliding, almost floating over the floorboards. Each step silent, controlled. I stumbled backward into the couch. My heart was pounding in my ears. Every instinct told me to fight, but I had no weapons, no defense. The shadow stopped, tilted its head, like it was studying me. Then it spoke. You saw too much. Now you'll see everything. Before I could react, it vanished. Gone. Just like that. I spent the next few hours inspecting the apartment. Every wall, floorboard, vent, and corner. Nothing. But I knew it had been real. It had to be. The air felt heavier where it had stood, like the room had been compressed by its presence. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the building made me flinch. Every flicker of light made me jump. I stayed awake until the first rays of dawn, waiting for the sound of footsteps, whispers, anything. And then I heard it soft tapping on the wall, above my head. Top, top, top. It wasn't the rhythm of the first tapping. It was different, deliberate, controlled, like a warning. I pressed my ear to the wall. You can't hide from me. The voice was deeper this time, older, confident, certain. I stumbled back, trembling. My fingers brushed the hole that had been patched weeks ago. My stomach churned. The plaster was warm, not room temperature, warm. I realized then he had never left. Mr. Clark had been inside my walls, watching, moving, listening, planning. The next morning, I called the building manager. "Something's wrong," I said. "I think someone is inside my apartment, in the walls." He laughed, nervously. "That's impossible. We've had inspections. The apartment is sealed. No one can be in the walls." I wanted to scream, but I knew better, because the night had proved otherwise. That evening, I tried to leave, packed a bag, intended to stay with a friend. But when I reached the door, the knob wouldn't turn. Not stuck, locked, and taped to the inside of my door in thick black marker. "You don't get to leave." I ripped it off, tried the knob again. Still locked. I ran to the window, considered jumping. But the third floor was too high, the street too far. And then I heard it coming from the vent above me. Soft, slow, methodical. I'm inside. I've always been inside. You just didn't notice. The lights flickered. The TV static buzzed. My phone vibrated in my hand. Unknown number. Picture. It was the interior of my apartment. From the ceiling, my bed, the couch, the kitchenette, and in the corner a figure. Watching, waiting, smiling. I dropped the phone. My legs buckled. I sat on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Somewhere inside those walls, Mr. Clark was alive. He had never left. And now I realized with terror, there was nowhere to hide. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. My body was exhausted, my eyes heavy, but my mind wouldn't allow it. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum of the refrigerator, every gust of wind rattling the window made me flinch. The apartment had transformed from a home into a trap. Prison. I sat on the floor, leaning against the couch, trying to make sense of what had happened. The messages, the photos, the shadow, the taps, the vent. It was all one thing. One person. One terrifying mind that had carefully infiltrated my life. And then it started. First, faint, soft, almost imperceptible. Top, top, top. The rhythm was deliberate, not random, not the same as the tapping I'd heard weeks before, but purposeful. I pressed my ear to the wall, the one that separated me from apartment 3B. "Hello," I whispered. Silence, and then a voice, low, controlled, clear, direct. "You know why I'm here." I jolted back, my heart hammering. I hadn't expected words, not like this, not audible from the wall. But the voice was unmistakable, calm, confident, patient. "You saw my cameras. You saw too much. I'm just finishing what I started." I felt bile rise in my throat. I could feel the floorboards beneath me shiver slightly, as if he were pacing somewhere below or behind them. I wanted to run. My bag was in the corner, packed. My phone silent. Every line of escape cut off. "I've been in your walls longer than you think. You walk, you sleep, you eat. I'm always here." I pressed my ear harder, trembling. The voice was coming from everywhere at once, the walls, the vent, maybe even the floor. My body wanted to bolt, but my brain forced me to listen. I needed to understand. "Do you know how easy it was to watch you? To know your habits? I learned your routines in days. Your favorite chair, your favorite mug, when you shower, when you sleep. I know where you are at all times." The words weren't just terrifying. They were precise, clinical. He had studied me, followed me, prepared this meticulously. I asked, my voice shaking, "What do you want?" Silence. Then the voice again. "I want what you can't give me. I want you to see me, to understand what I see, to feel what it's like to be watched." I swallowed hard. The fear had a texture now, like it had weight pressing against my chest. Every muscle tensed. I made a decision. I had to try to confront him, maybe reason with him, maybe scare him, anything. I grabbed a flashlight, creeping toward the bedroom wall. The patched hole was there, unassuming. My hands shook as I pressed the light into it. Nothing, just plaster. Then I remembered the vent above my bed. I pulled it down, carefully, quietly. My fingers brushed wires. and then movement. A pair of mechanical eyes. A tiny camera, just as before, swiveled in my direction. The red recording light wasn't on, but I knew it was there. Watching. He was watching. I ripped the camera free, yanking wires from the ductwork. Then I pressed my ear to the vent. "You can't remove them all," the voice said calmly. My stomach sank. I've built this building like a cage, like a spider web. I know every corner, every line, every hollow space. You'll never be alone again. I stepped back. My hands shook. My heart hammered so violently I could hear it in my ears. Then a new sound, faint scratching at the baseboards near the closet. I approached cautiously. Floorboards creaked. Dust fell. And then a small square of the floor moved slightly, as if it had been loosened. I knelt and lifted it. Inside more cameras, hidden lenses, and a small pile of photographs. Flipping through them, my blood ran cold. Each photo was taken during moments I thought I was alone. Making coffee, brushing my teeth, lying on the couch, looking at my phone. And at the bottom of the pile, a single Polaroid of my front door, from the outside with my bag packed and ready to leave. "You'll never leave," the voice whispered from somewhere behind me. I jumped, heart in my throat. My flashlight swung. Nothing. Just shadows. Just walls. I realized something. He didn't need to be seen. He didn't need to appear. His control came from knowing, from watching, from anticipating. And he had. Every movement, every decision, every plan. Hours passed like this. I sat, huddled on the floor, flashlight in hand, watching every corner, every shadow, every vent, listening, waiting. I thought about escaping through the window, through the hallway, through the roof. But every exit had been monitored, every escape route anticipated. And that's when I understood the full horror. He wasn't just in apartment 3B. He was in the walls. He was in the vents. He was in the floors. He was in the building itself. He had built a network, a surveillance network, and I was the target. The only way to survive, I realized, was to play by his rules. To move when he expected me to move, to hide when he wanted me to hide, to pretend ignorance when he demanded attention. And even then, there was no guarantee. The night stretched endlessly. The tapping, the scratches, the whispers continued in sporadic bursts. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I didn't leave the floor. I barely breathed. When dawn finally came, I felt hollowed out. Every muscle screamed. Every nerve ached. But the fear was different now. Not the panic of surprise, but the slow, grinding certainty that he was always there, waiting, watching, patient. And the most terrifying part? I knew this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night, not a second. Every creak from the wall felt like a whisper meant only for me. I kept staring at the thin plaster divider between my bed and his living room, counting the seconds between each sound. Sometimes it was a slow drag, like something heavy sliding across the floor. Other times it was faint breathing. By 4 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on my phone flashlight and began recording, just pointing it at the wall. If something happened again, I wanted proof. The little blue light from the camera blinked, and I whispered to myself, "It's just a video, just in case." At 4:16 a.m., there it was, a sharp knock, 3 times, from the other side, not random, measured. I froze, the phone trembling in my hand. The knock stopped, followed by a voice, muffled, calm, almost like he was talking through the wall. "Why are you awake?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the recording timer ticking up. Then, quieter. "You shouldn't be awake right now." My heart dropped into my stomach. I bolted up, grabbed my keys, and ran straight out of the apartment, barefoot. I didn't even bother to lock the door behind me. The hallway was silent. All the other doors looked identical, that same dull brown paint, the same silver numbers. His door was slightly open, just enough for the dark inside to look back at me. Something metallic clinked from within. Then, the slow click of a lock turning. I ran. I sat in my car outside the building for an hour before sunrise, watching the windows of his apartment. At one point, the curtain on the far right moved, not like someone brushing past it, but like someone watching me. By 8 a.m., I decided I couldn't do this anymore. I went straight to the landlord's office, still in the same hoodie, still shaking. The landlord, a tired man in his 50s, frowned when I told him what I'd heard. He sighed and said, "You're not the first one." Those words hit harder than anything. He went into a file cabinet, pulled out a folder, and set it on the desk. Inside were complaint slips, all from my floor. Each one mentioned the man in 3B. The dates went back years. He told me, "Police came once, said they didn't find anything unusual. He's quiet, pays rent on time. No reason to evict." I asked him who had lived in my unit before me. He flipped a few papers, hesitated, then said quietly, "A young woman, moved out suddenly, didn't even collect her deposit." I left without saying another word. The building looked the same, but it felt heavier. You know that feeling when you walk into a place where something bad has happened? Like the air itself knows a secret. When I reached my floor, I noticed his door, 3B, was wide open. I froze. The landlord was standing there with two maintenance guys. He turned around when he saw me. "Oh, you're back. They're cleaning out the place." "He's gone." "Gone?" I asked. He nodded. "Vanished last night. Left all his things behind." I looked inside. It was strange. The apartment was spotless, like no one had ever lived there. But in the center of the living room was a single wooden chair, facing the wall we shared, the wall that connected to my bedroom. The landlord muttered, "Weird, right? Police said they'll come back later for a final check." I asked him if they found anything else. He shrugged. "Just this." He handed me a small object sealed in a plastic bag. The police had apparently left it there for now. It was a USB drive. No label. Something about it felt wrong, like holding it too long might invite something in. That night, I sat at my desk staring at the USB drive. Curiosity always wins, doesn't it? So I plugged it in. Took a second to load. Inside was one single folder, sleeper footage. My stomach dropped. I opened it. Dozens of video files, each labeled with a date, one for every night I'd been living there. I clicked on one from 3 weeks ago. The video opened to darkness, then static, then my bedroom. The camera was aimed directly at me. I was asleep, completely unaware. My hand trembled as I moved through the clips. Night after night, different angles. Some from near the foot of the bed. One from above the closet. Another from under the bed. The timestamps went all the way back to my first night in that apartment. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The last file was from the night before he disappeared. The title, "Last Night on P4. I double-clicked it. The video started with the usual darkness. Then I saw my bedroom again. But I wasn't there. My bed was empty. The door was slightly open, and I could hear faint footsteps in the hall. The camera shook, turned slowly toward the closet. And from the gap between the doors, something moved. A man stepped out. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was staring at the wall, the one that led to his apartment. My wall. He smiled faintly, then turned his head toward the camera, toward me. It wasn't the first time he'd looked into a lens. He knew exactly where it was. Then he whispered something almost too soft to hear. "She's awake tonight." The video ended. I slammed the laptop shut, ripped the USB out, and threw it across the room. My breathing was out of control. Then I realized something. The video was from last night, the night I hadn't even been home. So who had he been watching? I slowly turned toward the hallway, and the sound hit me first. A faint knock on my door. 3 times. I stared at the peephole. Nothing. Then, a folded note slid under the door. I didn't want to touch it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was the same kind of clean white paper as before, printed, no handwriting. "You shouldn't have watched." I dropped it, backed away, and called the police immediately. They said they'd send a car, but deep down I knew he was still somewhere close. The apartment next door looked empty, but I could still feel him watching. The police came 20 minutes later, 2 officers, same as before, one older, one younger. Their faces said everything. They didn't quite believe me, but they were too uneasy to dismiss it. I showed them the USB. The older one put on gloves, plugged it into his own laptop, and played the same file, lastnight.mp4. He froze halfway through. The younger one leaned closer, whispering, "That's not from your apartment, is it?" The officer rewound the footage. He paused at the frame where the man whispered, "She's awake tonight." Then he zoomed in. Behind him, reflected in the window, was another shape. Someone standing outside my door. The timestamp matched the exact time I'd been sitting in my car across town. The older officer said quietly, "This isn't a prank." They took the USB, bagged it, and told me not to stay there for the night. Again, but I couldn't leave. My cat, Milo, was still inside. I hadn't seen him since all this started. I begged the officers to help me look. They hesitated, then agreed. We went inside together, flashlights sweeping through the rooms. Everything looked untouched. My bed was neatly made, the closet door shut, the kitchen spotless. "Milo," I whispered. My voice sounded small in the silence. No response. Then the younger officer pointed at the wall, the one shared with the neighbor's apartment. There was a faint, discolored patch near the baseboard. He crouched, ran his fingers over it. "It's damp," he said, "like the wall's sweating." The older cop frowned. "Plumbing issue?" He tapped the drywall. Sounded hollow. He tapped again, softer this time, and something tapped back. Once, twice, 3 times. All of us froze. The younger officer straightened up, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. "You heard that?" The older one nodded slowly. "Stay here." They moved into the hallway, toward 3B, the supposedly empty unit. I stood by my door, heart pounding, watching them disappear into the dark hall. A minute passed, then another. Then came a bang, loud enough to shake the light fixtures. I screamed. The hallway lights flickered. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Finally, the older officer's voice echoed down the hall. "We need backup. Now." I forced myself to step out. The door to 3B was open again. Inside, I saw the younger officer standing near the window, flashlight trembling. On the floor, beneath a loose floorboard, was a shallow pit. Inside, tangled wires, a small monitor, and a camera feed still running. One of the screens showed my own bedroom. Live. The timestamp ticked by in real time. And there, lying on my bed, was me. Except I was standing right there in the hallway. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "That's not possible," I whispered. The officer turned the flashlight toward me, his eyes wide. "Then who is that?" He stormed into my room while the other called for backup. I followed, against every instinct screaming not to. The door was open. The bed was empty, but the sheets were still indented, warm, like someone had just been there seconds ago. The younger officer pointed toward the wall again. The sound was back. Faint breathing, this time right inside the drywall. He pressed his ear against it, then suddenly pulled back, eyes wide. "There's..." Before he could finish, something slammed from the other side. A hard, echoing thud that sent cracks up the plaster. We both stumbled back. The officer aimed his gun. The wall thudded again, harder this time, like something or someone was trying to push through. Then it stopped. Silence. The sound of footsteps moving away, fading deeper into the wall. That night, they sealed both apartments. The police said they'd call in a special unit in the morning to check the structure. But I knew it wasn't the building. He had been living inside it. And now he wasn't in the wall anymore. Somewhere between the drywall, the vents, and the crawl spaces of that old complex, he was still moving. And somehow he'd filmed me from angles I still can't find. They told me to pack a bag and leave for the night, that they'd call when it was safe. But how do you leave when you know the danger doesn't stop at the front door? I didn't sleep. I stayed at my friend Lena's place again, the one person who still believed every word. I played her the recordings, showed her the footage, the messages, everything. She sat there quietly, hands pressed over her mouth. When I was done, she said one thing. "You're not going back there. Ever." I wanted to agree, but something inside me needed to understand. The next morning, I went back. Police tape stretched across my apartment and the one next door. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. I waited until the officers outside went down to their car. Then I slipped under the tape and into 3B. The place looked stripped. All the furniture was gone except for that single wooden chair, still facing the wall. On the wall, I noticed something new. A square cut out of drywall about 2 feet wide had been removed. Behind it was a crawl space, dark and narrow. My stomach turned. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and something metallic. Maybe rust. Or blood. I turned on my phone flashlight and shone it inside. It was bigger than I expected, like a hidden tunnel running along the back of the wall. Wires, pipes, insulation, and in between them, little openings that looked directly into other apartments, including mine. I crawled inside before I could talk myself out of it. Every inch of the space made me shiver. The walls were covered in faint scratches, some like initials, others like tally marks. About 10 feet in, I found a box. A plain cardboard box, taped shut. I pulled it out, wiped the dust away, and opened it. Inside were photos, hundreds of them, all of tenants who had lived on this floor. Some sleeping, some brushing their teeth, others just sitting in their living rooms. Each photo labeled with a name and date. By the time I realized what had just happened, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. The photo from Lena's kitchen wasn't old. It was live, real time. Someone had taken it right now. I didn't know if I should scream, cry, or run. I did all three at once, pacing the small apartment, my eyes darting to every corner, every window, every shadow. Lena watched quietly, her hand over her mouth. I could tell she was terrified, but I had become something else entirely. Alert, panicked, and suspicious of everything. I tried calling the police again, but the line went dead, just like before. I couldn't reach anyone. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You're not safe there either." I threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and skidded under the couch. I sank to the floor, covering my face. My mind raced. Then Lena spoke, quietly, almost whispering. "He's inside the building. He hasn't left. He's always watching." I shook my head violently. "No, that's impossible. They cleared the place. They didn't clear the crawl spaces. They didn't check the vents. They only sealed 3B. He knows this." I swallowed hard. She was right. He knew everything. He always knew everything. I couldn't sit there anymore. I had to act. I grabbed a flashlight, a kitchen knife, anything that might defend me. Lena tried to stop me, but I told her I needed to see for myself, to finally understand. We returned to the building under the cover of darkness. The police had left for the night. Every apartment was dark. Every hallway silent. Too silent. I stepped into the first unit above 3B. Empty. No furniture, no people, nothing. Just the faint smell of dust. Then I noticed it. A small square of drywall near the closet. Loose. I pressed my ear to it. First, nothing. Then soft scratching. Scratching that seemed to follow a pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap. I nearly vomited. I motioned for Lena to stay back and pulled the drywall open. Inside, a narrow crawl space, the same one I had found in 3B. But this one was different. There were wires, cameras, and small monitors. But more importantly, there were footprints in the dust. Fresh footprints leading deeper into the crawl space. I swallowed hard. My heart pounded. I had to know who was there. I crawled in, following the tracks. Every step made me tense. Every creak in the floor above me sounded like thunder. The crawl space twisted and turned, narrow passages connecting multiple apartments. And then I saw him, standing at the far end, partially hidden by a wall. Watching. Calm. Collected. He was thin, tall, hair falling into his eyes, just like in the video. His eyes met mine. No expression, but an undeniable intensity. I froze. He took a single step forward. "I told you, you can't hide from me." I grabbed the nearest wire and swung it like a whip. It hit him, and he didn't flinch. He simply raised a hand, and the monitors around him flickered. Each screen now showed me every apartment, every hallway, every angle. I realized then he didn't need to move to watch me. He had cameras everywhere. He smiled faintly. You think the crawl spaces are dangerous? No. The building itself is mine. Every wall, every vent, every floorboard, my eyes are everywhere. I backed away, my flashlight trembling, and stumbled into a corner, my chest heaving. I could feel him closing in, even without seeing him move. And then a sound from above. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming down the hallway outside. He turned his head toward the noise, listening. His attention split. That was my chance. I bolted, crawled backward as fast as I could, ducking into a side passage. My hands scraped the insulation and wires. Dust filled my lungs. Finally, I saw a light, the exit to another hallway. I scrambled out, gasping, and ran straight for the stairs. Behind me, I could hear him moving through the crawl space. Faster now. The sound of metal scraping wood. The faint thud of boots on floorboards. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I burst out of the building into the cold night air. The street was empty. My lungs burned. My legs ached. Somewhere inside, he was still there. Waiting. Watching. Patient. Calculating. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I ran until the building was just a fading shape behind me, swallowed by the night. My lungs burned, my heartbeat in my ears. But even as I slowed, even as the wind stung my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there. Not just behind me, but around me. Like his presence had left the walls and was now hiding inside every sound, every shadow. Lena caught up a few blocks later. She didn't speak. She just grabbed my arm and steered me into a 24-hour diner across the street. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap syrup felt grounding. Normal. For a moment, we sat in the corner booth, trembling hands around hot mugs we never drank from. Neither of us said anything until the waitress left. Finally, Lena whispered, "We have to tell someone else. The media, the news, someone who'll listen." I nodded, but my voice barely worked. "He's still in there." She frowned. "You're sure?" I looked out the window toward my apartment building. The top floor light flickered once, then went out completely. "I'm sure." We stayed at the diner until sunrise. My phone buzzed constantly. Calls from the police, messages from the landlord, even unknown numbers that I didn't dare open. When daylight finally came, we drove straight to the station. I told them everything. Again. The USB, the crawl spaces, the photos, the man. I even drew a map of the tunnels I'd seen. The detective, a tall woman with dark circles under her eyes, listened carefully. She didn't interrupt, didn't look away. When I finished, she said, "We've been inside that building all morning." I froze. "And," she sighed, "the crawl space is real. It runs behind every unit, but it's old, parts of it have collapsed. We found some of the cameras you mentioned, but they were dead. No recordings, no signals. Whoever set them up knew what they were doing." My stomach tightened. "Did you find him?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "No, but we found something else." She placed a clear evidence bag on the table. Inside was a photo, printed, clean, and perfect. It was Lena and me, sitting in the diner. The timestamp, 3:17 a.m., exactly when we were there. Lena gasped. I felt my throat close. "How?" The detective shook her head. There were no cameras pointed into the diner, none that matched this angle. She leaned forward. "We need to know if either of you have been contacted again." My phone buzzed right then. All three of us jumped. I pulled it out with trembling hands. Another unknown number. No text this time, just a video file. The detective nodded for me to open it. It began with darkness. Then, slowly, the image came into focus. A small room, concrete walls, a single wooden chair. Someone sat in the chair back to the camera. Long hair. Familiar Paschev. It was me, but I was sitting completely still, head tilted slightly downward, like I was asleep. Then the voice came. You left too early. I wasn't finished showing you. The detective snatched the phone and ended the playback. Where did this come from? She asked sharply. I shook my head, speechless. I didn't know what to say. She turned to Lena. You two need to go somewhere safe. Now, we'll handle this. They put us in a temporary safe house, one of those small, plain apartments used for witness protection. Blank white walls, locked windows, a deadbolt on every door. For the first time in days, I thought maybe I could breathe again. But at 2 a.m., I woke to a faint noise. Not a knock, not breathing, just static. I followed the sound to the small TV in the living room. It was on, fuzzy screen. Then the picture sharpened. My apartment building, 3rd floor, my old window, and standing in front of it, looking out into the night, was him. He raised his hand slowly, waved once, then pointed straight at the camera. The feed cut to black. The house felt colder after the police left. They said they'd continue the investigation, but I could tell they didn't really believe me. Not completely. I was just the nervous neighbor who'd called too many times. The kind of person they file under concerned citizen and quietly forget once they get back to the station. I stood in my living room, hands shaking, staring through the blinds at Mr. Becker's apartment. His lights were still on, that soft yellow glow leaking out into the night like nothing bad had ever happened there. But something had. I could feel it. The air itself seemed wrong. Every few minutes, I thought I heard movement from his place. Footsteps, the chair scraping, maybe even a low hum. My mind told me I was imagining it. That trauma plays tricks, but deep down I knew I wasn't. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, listening, waiting for proof that I wasn't crazy. Around 2 a.m. it came. A faint thud, then another, then silence. I crept to the wall we shared and pressed my ear against it. The sound was rhythmic now, heavy, slow, dragging. My heart started pounding. I reached for my phone, ready to record it this time. If the police wouldn't believe me, I'd give them proof. I hit record and held my breath. The dragging sound stopped. Then something new. A voice, muffled but close. Too close. You shouldn't have come here. It was Becker. I froze. He was talking to someone. They always stick their nose in, and then they find out. My stomach dropped. There was another sound, softer, like a whimper. Someone else was in there. I didn't think. I just ran to my door, yanked it open, and stormed into the hall. Becker's door was locked, but I could see the faint flicker of movement through the peephole. Hey! I shouted. Who's in there? The movement stopped. Then, the sound of footsteps approaching. For a heartbeat, I thought he was coming to the door. I stepped back, halfway between fear and adrenaline. Then the footsteps stopped right on the other side of the door. And then, a single knock. Not loud, just one deliberate knock. My phone was still in my hand. I thought about dialing 911, but my fingers wouldn't move. My body felt frozen. Then the voice, calm, steady, and far too close. Why don't you come in, neighbor? My breath hitched. I didn't answer. I turned and ran back to my apartment, slammed the door, locked it, and backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. For the rest of the night, I didn't move. Not even when I heard footsteps pacing the hallway hours later. By morning, the building was silent again. Becker's lights were off. His car was gone. And I finally saw it. A dark smear near the doorframe, half hidden by shadow. Dried, rusty brown. Blood. I took the recording to the police that afternoon. They told me they'd look into it. But the detective's face said what his words didn't. There was nothing they could do without a warrant. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't care about the lease or my stuff. I just needed to leave. But when I stepped into the hallway, Becker's door was open. Just a crack. Enough to see the edge of the frame and something glinting on the floor, metal, dull silver, like a key. My heart thudded in my throat. He was gone. I could just take a look, grab proof, and get out. I pushed the door slowly. It creaked open, revealing darkness and a faint smell. Copper, bleach, something sweet and rotten underneath. And then I saw it. The living room floor was covered in plastic sheeting. The walls stripped of pictures, the couch gone. In its place, a single chair, and beside it, a camera on a tripod. I didn't have time to process it before I heard the floorboard creak behind me. I spun around. There he was, Mr. Becker, standing in the doorway, smiling faintly, one hand holding the doorknob. "Leaving so soon?" he asked softly. The door slammed shut. The second I saw him, my stomach dropped. The faint smile on his face didn't belong to a normal person. It belonged to someone who had rehearsed this moment over and over, like he'd imagined it in every possible scenario, and he had anticipated my every move. I tried to speak, but my voice faltered. What do you want?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me as if I were a fragile experiment. "I want you to see," he said calmly, "to understand what it's like to live inside someone else's world without them knowing, to feel the eyes you can't escape." My heart raced. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the door behind me had locked with a soft click as I'd entered. That wasn't accidental. "You've been everywhere I've been," he continued. "Watching, listening, thinking you could escape. But you can't. You never could." I tried the doorknob. Locked. I tugged at the handle, twisted it, pushed. Nothing. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. I could see the faint glint of something metallic in his hand. A small box cutter, the kind that could easily slice through drywall. "Don't even think about screaming," he whispered. "No one will hear you." I backed into the corner, my body pressed against the wall. The chair, the same one he had placed in the center of the room when I first saw him, was behind him now, positioned perfectly for control. I realized with sudden horror, the entire room was set up. Every angle, every shadow, every piece of furniture was deliberate. A stage, and I was the unwilling audience. He knelt slowly beside the chair. "Sit," he said. I didn't move. He didn't raise his voice, but the weight of his presence made it impossible to resist. Slowly, I sank into the chair, my hands gripping the edges. "You've seen the cameras, the crawl spaces, the tunnels," he said, "but you've never truly understood why." I tried to process his words, but my mind was clouded with fear. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because people ignore what's around them. They walk through life blind. But I see. I notice. I watch. Every moment matters. Every sound, every breath, every little secret. That's what I collect. That's what I control." He stood and moved to a wall lined with monitors. Dozens of them still flickering, showing every apartment in the building. Some images were old, some live. And then my stomach sank. One screen showed Lena's apartment. Live. He turned back to me, expression calm. "You thought you were safe here? No. The network extends further than you know. Your friends, your family, every place you think is secure, is just another corner of my maze." I shivered. The reality was suffocating. He wasn't just a man. He was a cyst. "What do you mean?" I asked, panic rising. He smiled faintly. "I've already uploaded the first batch. The videos, the images, everything you've seen, every private moment. They're already out there. The world is watching you now. And there's nothing you can do to stop it." I felt my chest tighten. The walls weren't just watching anymore. The building wasn't just watching. He had reached beyond it, into the digital world, into my life. I needed to move. I had to think, but every instinct screamed that any sudden motion would trigger him. And then, quietly, almost as if he were testing me, "You could try to escape. But remember, I know everything. Every route, every exit, every moment you think is safe." I swallowed hard. I realized I had one choice. I had to fight, but carefully. Every step had to be calculated. Every movement predicted. My mind raced, searching for a flaw in his plan, any possible weakness. He moved toward the monitors again, fingers dancing across the buttons, adjusting angles, zooming in on cameras. His back was turned. I took a deep breath, remembering every layout I'd ever seen. The crawl spaces, the vents, the walls, the doors. One route, one small chance might let me slip out. Slowly, I reached toward the knife on the table beside the chair, trying to keep my hands steady. My pulse was deafening. He didn't notice. Not yet. And that's when I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I had to survive to warn Lena, to warn anyone who could be next. Because if I failed, no one else would ever know what really happened behind those walls. When he turned back toward the screens, I moved. Quiet, fast, every ounce of fear channeled into instinct. My fingers closed around the knife handle, cold and slick from the condensation on the plastic sheet beneath it. But the sound of the metal scraping against the table betrayed me. Becker spun around, faster than I thought a man his age could move. His hand came down on my wrist with bone-crushing force, slamming it against the chair arm. "Ah!" I cried out. The knife clattered to the floor, sliding across the plastic. His calm voice returned, quiet but full of fury. "You just don't listen, do you?" He leaned close, his breath sour, his eyes unblinking. "You could have been smart. You could have just watched." I stared back at him, trembling. "You killed them, didn't you?" I hissed. "Lena, the others, you killed them all." His expression didn't change, but the faint twitch in his jaw said everything. "People disappear all the time," he said flatly. "Some because they're careless, some because they ask questions." I pushed against him with all the strength I had. He stumbled back, just enough. I dove for the floor, fingers scraping the plastic until I found the knife again. I swung wildly, not thinking, just surviving. He dodged the first swing, but the second caught his arm. He screamed, staggering back into the wall of monitors. Sparks flew as one of them shattered. For a second, I thought about finishing it, but my brain screamed one word: run. I bolted for the door. He lunged after me, grabbing my sleeve. The fabric tore, my shoulder burning as I ripped free. I slammed against the lock. It wouldn't budge. He was coming again. I hit it once more, harder this time, shoulder first. The frame cracked, and I fell into the hallway. I ran barefoot, knife still in my hand, heart in my throat. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead. Behind me, I heard him yell. Not words, just sound. Rage and disbelief twisted into one noise. "You can't hide." I hit the stairwell door, nearly tripping on the first step down. The world spun, my lungs burning. I kept running, past the mailboxes, through the cracked lobby door, out into the freezing night. The street lights burned yellow against the empty asphalt. No cars, no movement, just silence. And then the sirens, somewhere far off, getting closer. When I looked back, Becker was standing in the doorway, framed by the flickering light. Blood darkened his sleeve, but he wasn't chasing me anymore. He was just smiling. He raised one hand and pointed toward me, slow and deliberate, like a director ending a scene. Then he turned and walked back inside. The police took my statement again. This time, they couldn't ignore it. They searched the building top to bottom. But when they entered Becker's apartment, it was empty. The plastic sheeting, the monitors, the chair, gone. Every trace of what I saw had been cleaned out, like it had never existed. They found no fingerprints, no blood. The only thing left behind was a small flash drive, taped to the underside of the kitchen counter. When the detective plugged it in, there was just one video file. It was me, sitting in that chair. From a camera angle I hadn't even noticed, my eyes wide, terrified, staring right into the lens. The timestamp was from 30 minutes before the police arrived. They never found Becker. His name wasn't even real. The lease was under a false identity. Every record led to a dead end. I moved cities after that, changed jobs, tried to forget. But sometimes late at night I still feel it. The hum of a camera that isn't there. The faint buzz of electricity behind the walls. And sometimes when I check my phone, I find a new notification. A video link. No sender. Just the title. The Girl Who Watched Too Much. I never open it. But deep down, I already know what's in it.